Hello everyone, my name is Ethan Page, and today I'm going to talk about my fourth Unity tutorial, which is covering editor scripting, attributes, property drawers, drawers as in something that draws something, not as in the storage units, bit masking, and scriptable objects. Now to start off, I think it's good to begin with the editor scripting. Usually, I would click play and show you something about this project. However, everything we're going to be looking at today is to do with modifying the editor and using it. Well, most everything, scriptural objects and bit masking technically notwithstanding. However, you may notice already, I've got something in the bottom here, object count 5. Bring the console over. Notice it says object count 5. It says that 3 times. Oh, 4th time. If I click on the cube, it says it again. If I move the cube around, it's saying it a little bit more. If I were to, let's see, how about I create a new cube? Now there are 6. This is keeping accurate count of all of the objects that are currently in the scene. Back down to 5. Let's clear that so it doesn't get too full. Now, how might I be doing this, you may ask? Good question. With an object counter script. Now, the important thing is Unity Editor. It isn't required in all of the scripts I'm going to be showing you, but it is good to have it there in a good few of them. I'll explain why. The other important thing for this to work is execute in edit mode, this attribute, this tag. We'll cover attributes again a bit more later on, but know that these square brackets define what an attribute is in code, or rather implement it. So I simply have a class, object counter, it's a mono behavior, and I have an update function. It creates an array of game objects, and finds all of the game objects in the scene, and then debug logs them out. Now, execute in edit mode allows code, as you saw, to execute in edit mode. I click on this and it shows up here. But that's just it. I clicked on that despite it being in the update function, and it's shown up once, twice. Just periodically it'll do things when something changes. If I click this, 3, 5, 7. A few things have changed, a few things have loaded. And that's how update works in the editor. So when something changes, that is when update is triggered. Aside from that, your start functions, your await functions, they work the same as ever. This isn't the only thing we can do, however. For example, up here, I have demonstration, which isn't usually on the menu. That is because I made it. Now if I click only for cube, hey look, it's a cube. If I click this here, well, it's grayed out. I am unable to click it. What I can do, let's go back to the cube for this one, so I don't hurt your eyes. I can change the color of the cube to white, or perhaps back to red, or to green, or even to blue. All in the editor, or with just a simple menu declaration. I do this with the menu item script I have here. This one is important to have in the Unity editor, and the location of the script is also important. Get back to what it does in a moment. The editor over here, the menu item script is in this editor. It is important that it is here, otherwise it won't work. The editor folder is within the assets folder. To look back at what it does, it's a public class menu items. Notice it isn't a mono behavior, it is just this own class. I create, as per this syntax here, a menu item. This is the path, the overarching menu button, the sub-menu here. False means it will always be there. I'll get onto that in just a moment. And 100 is the location. The lower the number, the higher up on the list it will appear. When it is clicked, it will then activate this function, which in this case debugs I'm a cube. False here means it will always be there. If you have a true statement, then the function within needs to validate the false of the same name and location. That is exactly what this does. This is a bool function, and it throws back whether or not the selection is something with the tag of cube, which is why only my little, to begin with, red and multicolored cube was able to do it. If what I've selected doesn't have this tag, or whatever the specified deciding factor is, the object will be grayed out and unselectable. Beyond that, we have other submenus. I change color white at 101, then 102, 103, 104. These all just, again, define the location. It does the same as it does up here. It has a function within that does something. In this case, it grabs the selection, grabs the renderer of what I have, grabs the shared material, the color, and then changes it to white, red, green, or blue. One of the other things you may have noticed is with the menu, if I have it clicked here, change color, it's just white, red, green, blue. Nothing super special there. There's a little bit of formatting available. Say, if I make this 128. It's not going to shoot it down the page or anything. What it should do is nothing. Did I not save? Let me save this too. There it is. It'll insert a line break. It allows you to have just that little bit of extra formatting so that you can separate your menu items a bit better. Have your own custom editor look nicer. This is done when you have a gap of 11 or more. So for example, let's put it to 114. Let's save it first, that might help. It's still there, but if I go to 113, back to normal. That's just for the sake of making it look nice. Beyond that, we have, let's look a little bit more in depth at attributes, which are these little tags here, and property drawers, as they can go rather hand in hand. Now, attribute definitions, I have just a few here. Only using Unity Engine, that's all that you need to have as a using statement. I create a public class, red text attribute, and it is of type property attribute. Then what I create is just a public red text attribute, and that's it. That's all I need to do in this script. Now that is in just your standard scripts folder. I just have attribute definitions. You have as many of those in there as you like for all sorts of things. That allows you to put in certain tags. Now we'll have a look at scriptural objects a little bit more in detail in just a moment, but know that it allows for, in resources, sorry not that, non per cube, well now the display name's blue and the max HP is red, so is the HP, and the level is a really odd green. This can help do many things. It's all for formatting or for the editor. I've simply just changed the colors. You could use the color changing to bring attention to things. You could get rid of end lines. You could add more space between things, draw lines between things. It's all to do with formatting. There are things that can be done as well, but that seems to be one of the most common things that I've come across. In fact, even this weapon proficiency thing here uses it as well, but I'll get to that in a moment when I cover bit masking. So, back to the attributes. In order to get them to actually change the colors instead of just have an attribute text, after all, this little flag here, green text, or red text, blue text, green text, or red text attribute, in front of the variable in question, that's what changes it. I could just have this, and then those tags, they would appear, but they would do absolutely nothing. In order to make them do something, we need to have drawers. Forgive my pronunciation, that's not a word that comes easily. So, I have Unity Engine, Unity Editor. This goes into that same editor folder in the assets as I was shown earlier. create a custom property drawer, type of, and then you create, in this case, the red text attribute, or the green text attribute, blue text attribute, whatever you want to call it, but it is what you want to call it, and then the attribute. After all, that's what you're creating. So I have class, red text drawer, from property drawer. I create a new GUI style that overrides the one that's already there, grabs the position of the rectangle, the contents, the labels. I then create the new text color, in this case, red. The GUI label field, I grab the positions, label, and this new style, and I insert it. I draw the rectangle with this bit here, and then I make the GUI content none because I've just changed the text color. All in all, with this chunk of code here, or this chunk of code here if I wanted to do it for green, once again blue, the rest of it's the same. All I'm doing is changing the color. That is what allows for this to happen. Now, finally, well, not finally, we have bit masking. Bit masking is what is shown in the NPC, my non-player cube. Ha 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 ha. It is another way to handle enums. If you have a standard enum, let's comment out this real quick. And I go back over here. Once it loads, and have a drop down. And I can choose any one of these things, but that's just it. I can choose one of them. With the enum flag, that I have here, which is another one of these attributes and property drawers as per the text, just to show what else it can do. That plus bit masking allows me to have, oh, not click away from it, buttons, so I can enable multiple things. Currently he just has spear equipped. Now bit masking itself is in these enums. You attach numbers to the enums. For example, 1. However, and this would be 2, and this would be 3, and this would be 4 if we ignore these little side carrots and everything. But in order for bit masking to work properly, I need to make it look a bit more like binary. In order to do that, well, I use this, and that's how many decimal places you move this 1 over. So for example, 0. It stays right there at the beginning. But I move this 1, the axe is now 1 place over, so it's at 1. The spear is now 2 places over. It's here. The gun is now 3 places over. It's there. What bit masking is, all in all, is a way to store data. You take a bunch of Boolean values, such as proficiency in sword, axe, spear, or gun, hence the buttons. They can only either be on or off. And you assign them places akin to binary code, and that is exactly how it is stored. The binary code is compiled into an integer, and that integer represents whatever you've defined it as. For example, if someone had proficiency in spear and sword, his number would be 0101, which would be, for those of you who are binary savvy, 9. So now the number 9 defines that he has proficiency in sword and spear. You can get bit masking on your own using, well, just about this. However, in order to get it to display with the buttons, I created another attribute definition with the enum flag attribute and the enum flag drawer. This is code that I found online. I will provide a link to it in the description of this video. However, all of this allows for the buttons to appear. It's more of a usability thing. Bit masking itself is also used in layers. You may have noticed with all these layers, you can choose any one of them, or you can choose multiple of them, and suddenly my cube here may exist on the default layer and the water layer. Oh well, let's put it back on the default layer. That's really where it should be. In order to get the check mark there, it's simply this is 0 and this is 1, and it's bit masking. Finally, we have scriptable objects. That is what this is. This little symbol here, non-player cube 1, non-player cube 2. A scriptable object is, once again, its own thing. This needs to go, I believe, in the resource... sorry, not resources. The script itself can be anywhere, but in order to load scriptable objects in, the scriptable objects once created need to be themselves in the resources folder. You can put whatever the hell you want in here, really. Usually it's used for classes. After all, scriptable objects are a way of creating and holding data, much akin to the namespaces from Project 2, the tutorial video of mine. Now, the thing about scriptable objects is it holds, for want of a better term, default values. When you set this up, sorry about that. When you set this up, you give it variables, and when you set the variables equal to something in the inspector, those are what the default values are. Editing these values during runtime is frowned upon because suddenly, let's say you have a health value. I only have the max health, notice. I do not have a standard health value. If I had a standard health value and I were to edit it during runtime, then every single thing of the scriptable object that inherits from the scriptable object, when that health value would change, everything's health value would change. For example, if you were fighting a horde of zombies, they all had 10 health and you dealt 5 damage, suddenly they all only have 5 health left. You deal another 5 damage and they all drop dead, just from you punching one of them. And that is, for most things, rather frowned upon. Back to my non-player cube, you'll notice I have a scriptural object variable template. And we'll get back to that in the class. This is to help with the updating proficiencies. I will go through this in a moment. When I press U, it will go through, and as you can access and change the each of these proficiencies in code, as bit masking has its own operators. The bit masking OR, which will take the proficiency being analyzed, in this case spear, and if it is inactive, it will make it active. If it's active, it will try and make it active again. Then there's the bitwise AND operator, this one here. It will compare my weapon proficiencies as they are stored, and one in particular, gun, and if it equals gun, so in other words, if my weapon proficiency has gun already, that is what this statement means. When it compares it to this, if it does have it, then hey, it has proficiency in gun. If my weapon does not have proficiency in gun, well then it doesn't. From there, this is the way to switch proficiencies. If it is on, take it off. And this here will toggle. If it is on, turn it off. If it is off, turn it on. I will go through those in a moment. Here's what I was looking for. Load from resources. Now this loads the template, as shown up here, the scriptural objects template, the NPC class, as a scriptural object. It makes the local display name equal to the template display name, the local max HP equal to template max HP, the local HP to the template max HP as well, after all it's the default values, and the local level equal to the template level. Excuse me. And that is how scriptural objects are really meant to be used. They are default values and nothing more. You can mess with the local values as much as you want, and that allows for the single enemy to die versus the whole horde. Now, to show this in action, if we go over here, let's make sure that's saved. And if I click play, if I select my player cube, look at the first one, you'll notice its name's test cube, max HP of 10 and level of 5. Non-player cube over here, companion cube, 20 and 10. It's almost like there's a theme in my videos. there are two here for one of the options that you can do with these things is you can have the local variables change to two separate default variables. Suddenly that enemy that you're fighting is transformed from an orc to a naga, or in this case from a test cube to a companion cube. It leveled up. Let's go with that. So when I press spacebar, if we're looking at the non-player cube, it's empty. Well, now its template is the non-player cube 1, it's test cube, max HP and HP of 10, level is 5. Do it again. Now it's switched. It's leveled up, level 10, it's got more HP, and it's companion cube. And is from this. The weapon proficiencies, as you may have seen, are local. Now if I start pressing U to go along with these, now it mentioned the cube does not have proficiency in gun. If I press U again, well, now it's switched. It no longer has proficiency in gun. I press U, proficiency in spear, proficiency in gun is back. I have now set spear active as per the bitwise OR operator in the beginning that I showed earlier. I'll show these one by one. So I've just done this. As per the bitwise OR, proficiency in spear is now on. If it wasn't before, it is now. If it was before, well, then it still is. Next I'm going to be comparing to see if I have proficiency in gun. And you may notice that I do. So when I press U again, I do have proficiency in gun. Next up, I will turn off my proficiency in spear if it is active. If not, then oh no, it's still off. It is essentially the exact opposite of the bitwise OR. There it is. And finally, I will toggle gun. So if it's on, it'll be off. If it's off, it will be on. In this case, it turned off. Really quickly, I will cycle through them again to show that this, see, it turns on. That is bitwise operators in code. This scaling indefinitely is the editor script now acting as a standard update function since it has begun. That is why that is doing that. So, editor scripting is useful for creating your own custom editor. It's to allow you to have a little more control over the things that go on. Attributes can help in code define things, and in certain cases, such as when combined with property drawers, they can allow you to bring attention to things by changing the color text, or even by changing how things are displayed. Bit masking is a way to store data in a singular number, which greatly reduces file size, especially in larger projects, and allows for easier out-of-project storage. And scriptable objects are created and loaded via resources.load. That is why they must be in the resources folder. You did specify the path and as a scriptable object. But they allow for default values of certain things to be saved and then accessed by all just through a simple file here. All in all, these are very useful projects, parts of code rather. It's very useful little individual parts of code to have to hand to know about. Thank you all for watching. It's been a pleasure.